And almost when things go well and things are good, then that part of my brain pipes up and says, "What are you worried about? What's the problem? You don't need to look good. People are watching your YouTube channel, whether you look good or look bad. People actually like you screwing up on YouTube and doing badly because it makes you relatable. Have a bit more to eat."
Mark Lewis is a YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of followers, and his channel is growing fast. Mark has already done his own growing, reaching 6'6" I believe, I'm guessing by about the age of 20, and about 100 kilograms of, well, evidently, pure muscle mass some years later, I think. Mark's YouTube channel is an entertaining, self-deprecating exploration into the fun and the pain of getting fit and competing at running, rowing, cycling, pulling and pushing very heavy objects, all while sweating, grunting, falling over, crossing finishing lines, and sometimes winning. Look, in all seriousness, Mark has achieved actually really very high levels of all-round fitness, as is documented in his channel. And he's had the guts and gumption to try out lots of physical challenges that many of us are probably fleetingly mused about doing, but never really taken any further. His videos document him exploring, for example, what it's like to cycle the length of the country. How fast did 5-time Olympic gold medalist Steven Redgrave, how fast did he row? Is a 100-kilometre ultra distance race possible without specific training? As all of this and much more is blended with a gentle look at the science behind the events and the high-tech wearables we can buy if we're so inclined. Mark couches his content within his own experiences of transitioning from a veritable couch potato to amateur veteran athletics influencer and ripped body positive, middle-aged, no middle life crisis superstar. So Mark, thank you for taking some time out of your busy training schedule and recording schedule to have a chat with me this afternoon. It's much obliged.
No, you're very welcome. No problem at all.
Mark, can we start with your backstory just briefly? So I think if I ask this question, I think I hit the nail on the head. So at the age of 40, can I ask you this pointed question? How much did you weigh?
Actually, at 40, I wasn't too bad, but a couple of years before, sort of 30, 36, 37, so I'm 50 now. So about 13, 14 years ago, I was getting close to 350 pounds. It's way over 20 stone in old money. And then by the time I was 40, I'd lost a lot of weight, but I hadn't actually got fit. I just stopped eating for a period of time. Not literally, but almost literally. And so between 40 and 50, I went from just unfit, but no longer grossly overweight, to being in reasonable shape.
In reasonable, well, we'll keep going, Mark. Go on.
Well, I was going to say that 50. I was 50 in November. Since November, I've then gone 4 months backwards. So it's nothing's constant.
These things come and go, but on a long
Yes.
run average for the last few years, you've been infinitely fitter than you were 10, 12 years prior to that.
Oh yeah, and even now, not having done anything really tough this year so far in terms of training, I'm still in better shape than I ever was in my 30s. No question, and most of my 40s as well, probably.
So at the age of 50, just turned 50. So I guess you're the same height you were. What about your weight and I guess body composition?
Yeah, the weight weirdly doesn't change much. I've been 100 kilos. So since I got down to 100 kilos, so 220 pounds, I've pretty much stayed there. So sometimes I will have lower levels of body fat and higher levels of muscle, which I do primarily just for picking up some footage I can use in YouTube clips, because YouTube loves that nonsense. And then I'll relax again and I'll lose a bit of muscle and I'll put on a bit of fat. But I tend to stick around 100. If I go over 105, 106 kilos, that's getting heavy. And even at my most extreme levels of dedication and training, I don't tend to get much below, I think, 96, maybe 95, 96. So 95 to 105 is kind of where I live. And I've been 6'6" since I was about 19, and I'm still exactly 6'6". So no deterioration yet.
You should have that for a good 10 years or 15 years, I think, at least.
I'd hope so. Yeah, I do a lot of hanging upside down for my bad back, and I'm hoping that hanging upside down will keep me the right height for a little bit longer. Yeah.
I'm sure. No, you got no problems there. But it gets a bit easier on planes as you get shorter. So there's a little silver lining there you can look forward to one of these days.
Yeah, I fly nice anyway, so it doesn't matter to me.
Fair enough. Now, what you document there is something relatively unusual because, I was at a conference sort of 18 months ago, a Royal Society conference with the good and the great, which didn't include me, of metabolism, research into metabolism, weight control, and obesity. And one of the themes that comes up over and over again is that it is very difficult for people to be able to obtain long-term reductions in weight. It is possible, but most people don't manage it. They may lose weight for a while, it tends to return. You're someone, as you described there, who's been able to push and pull your weight around, shall we say. Well, okay, actually, you mentioned that your weight per se hasn't changed that much, but your body composition has. And I think your activity levels have changed a lot. I guess my straightforward question is, you're clearly really into activity and fitness and sports and running around and sweating now. Was that not the case when you were 38?
No, not at all. No, in fact, going right back, I would have been into sport and activity until I was about 19, 20 years of age, and then around 20, maybe 21, I moved out of the fitness industry that I was working in, albeit very loosely. I was kind of fitness industry adjacent. I was a lifeguard and helped out in the gym and stuff, so I was involved in that world, and moved into financial services, and so just stopped doing any form of exercise whatsoever. So from the age of probably 21 through to late 30s, I would have done nothing. I mean, I say nothing. There might have been I think once I tried to run Reading half marathon, maybe halfway through that period, grossly overweight, and it nearly killed me. So by and large, I did nothing. So no, and until I started in my late 30s getting in shape, inverted commas, whatever that even means, I would have done very little. And actually, I don't do as much now as people perceive. Yeah, they say the camera adds a few pounds. The social media adds a level of athletic ability and commitment that just doesn't exist in real life. So people looking at my Instagram and seeing my YouTube will only see me exercising, or at least they'll see it a lot. And that isn't my actual life. I mean, I clearly do exercise, but no way near as much as many people do that take it to, really quite extreme levels. I don't mean extreme negatively. I just mean extreme in terms of a high level of commitment. So I maintain what I have with actually an awful lot less effort than people think. In terms of the exercise, the thing that controls my weight is what I eat. It's not what I do. As has been evidenced by the last few months, where I've done almost no exercise at all, when I've taken a break from it all. But my weight hasn't really shifted too much because I still keep a handle on what I eat. Sort of. I say sort of only because I don't eat consistently. But if I have if I have a bad period of eating, so if I eat badly on a Monday, I'll eat well on a Tuesday to compensate. So over the course of a week, I still keep a lid on how much I'm consuming. So in terms of body composition, that comes down to food. Exercise is, it has an impact, of course, but I regard my exercise as being for my fitness and my health, and I regard the kitchen as being for how I look. There's an overlap, but primarily that's how I distinguish the two.
That's interesting, and I think we might touch a bit more on your diet a bit later on if I can dig into that. But that's very useful and very interesting to hear. What is it, Mark, do you think that changed your mentality? This is over long periods of time, from being someone, okay, as a youngster, teenager who was interested in sports and exercise, to someone who broadly wasn't. I say interested as in didn't do it. And whose body shape and body composition changed over time. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but would have shifted a lot from what you were as a teenager, and I guess you would have been aware of that. To then, there's then that kind of, it sounds like there was a switch that was flicked or something like that, that then in your late 30s, maybe your temperament reverted to some degree to what it was as a teenager. Is that, how comes you've had such different kind of outlooks towards health and activity?
It's all come down to what I value at the time. So when I was a teenager, I valued looking a certain way. I mean, nowadays it would be easy to see why that would be the case, because every teenager values looking a certain way because of social media. When I was a teenager, it was I mean, I was born in 1973, so I was a teenager in the late 80s, early 90s. People valued just looking good, simply because that's how you that's how you got girls. It's kind of like, I suppose, the easiest answer. I mean, if you're a 15, 16-year-old boy, you didn't want kind of clicks and likes and stuff, because clicks and likes didn't exist, but girls did. So I would work out for that reason. At the age of 20, 21, I was in a relationship. I had my first kid. I was now working in an industry that valued money and nothing else. And so suddenly there was no requirement at all to look a certain way. How I looked no longer mattered. I didn't need to get a girl because I had what would then become my wife. I had children. So there was no longer any value placed by me or society on looking a certain way. The people I worked with were all grossly out of shape physically, but had lots of money and nice cars. So that became my currency. And I spent many, many years just valuing myself and measuring my success based on money. But I mean, I worked in financial services in the 90s, so it was, you've seen Wolf of Wall Street. It's not a million miles off of that environment. I then got to a point where in my late 30s I was heading towards divorce and losing. Consequently, ended up losing huge amounts of my money, and so, but because it was disappearing, it didn't cease to be of value to me, but it was a little bit like when I'm in great shape. If I start losing that because I can't be bothered for a while, it becomes quite hard to look in the mirror and see a body that was once, only a few weeks earlier, maybe something very impressive, and then see it become much less impressive and still be motivated by it. And the same thing happened with my financial success. I saw it all kind of falling apart through the process of divorce, and so simply stopped valuing it. Once I realized I was losing it, it ceased to be interesting. And so with nothing left to value, I kind of almost had room in my brain to be interested in something again. And I remember reading a book about getting divorced, and there was a line in it that said that if you are in bad shape physically, you should get in good shape, because it might save your marriage. And if it doesn't save your marriage, there will never be a more important time to be in good shape, because you're now single again. And it was just one of those things that just resonated with me. It just and to this day makes absolute sense, that concept that no matter what happens in your future, no matter how bad something might get or how something might turn out, if you are in better shape, it will be a better situation for you. I mean, it doesn't matter what that future entails. If I end up living under a bridge, doing so in great physical shape will be better than living under a bridge, fat and out of shape. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So I just kind of grabbed hold of that notion. It was also free. It was free to exercise. It didn't, the fact that you don't need any money to just put on some shoes and just go for a jog. It was just, I say you don't need any money. People now get obsessed with, you need latest Garmin and you need, 300 quid trainers and stuff. I didn't have any of that. I just put on some ropey old shoes and went jogging. So the fact that I was losing my business as I was at the time, and losing my wealth and losing my house and all that, none of it mattered. I still had my trainers. So I just kind of gravitated towards the thing that I could still do, and placed value upon that. And it gets hard. It gets hard now. It's hard today to still place a value on looking and feeling fit and healthy, because I don't require that for YouTube. I'm not a fitness YouTuber in the traditional sense. So I don't, I have to work on reminding myself why I should stay in shape, because the obvious answer for some would be, well, you're on YouTube, you need to be in shape for that. Actually, I don't. And people almost find me more relatable the less out of shape, the more out of shape I get. So yeah, it's just about, a very long-winded answer, but it's about placing value on it. If you don't value it, and whether that's because you value it because it's going to get you a girlfriend when you're a teenager, or whether it's going to keep you alive when you're old, or whatever the reason might be in the middle, if you don't value it, you'll never have it. And people that say, "Oh, I wish I was in shape, but I can't bother," well, then you won't be. You simply won't be. If you place no value upon it, how on earth will you put the effort in to achieve it? Not that you should either. If somebody wants to be out of shape, fine. I have, it's not my job to tell people they shouldn't be. But those that want to be, got to value it.
And yet, over the last 4 months, you said you actually taken a break from it. So that have you decided there's less value in it for the moment, or is this something for the YouTube channel, or you just felt your body needed a break?
All of the above, really. I trained incredibly hard. So towards the end of last year, I made a mistake. I mean, in a way, all this stuff is good for YouTube. So it will become YouTube content as we go through the year. And people all sort of automatically assume that therefore I must have lost my fitness for YouTube. It's kind of doing it for views. Actually, what happens is I simply look at where my life is at, and then that becomes YouTube content. So one follows the other. I just got bored with bored's the wrong word. A very good example actually is high rocks. I competed in a sport called high rocks, which is a growing sport at the moment. It's a bit like CrossFit. It's an easy way to describe it. And it almost acts as a kind of a metaphor or an analogy. I always get too confused. It acts as something to describe my whole approach to fitness last year. I got very, very into it and very focused upon it, and got to a point where I got as good as I could possibly get, and then hit a brick wall of simply my ability, or at least my likely ability to be any faster and to get any better at high rocks. I would have needed to apply a level of effort that would have just become ridiculous. I mean, the exponential increase in effort for minimal gains would have been ridiculous. So I became very demoralized with it, and that was kind of where my fitness got to. It got extreme. And when you do that, you find yourself immersed in a world of other people doing that sort of content, that sort of with their lives, that kind of extreme approach. So all the people I was talking to on a regular basis were also training like mad, and I just remember kind of looking around, not literally, but kind of figuratively, at that world I was in Christmas time, and thinking, they're all nuts. This is ridiculous. We're all kind of weekend warriors, and these are accountants and school teachers and whatever, butchers, and these aren't athletes. These are people but they aren't athletes, but they forego so much to do what? To get a podium on an event that most of the population's never even heard of, and doesn't really matter. And it just left me feeling that I'd almost kind of found myself in a cult almost. And so I kind of rebelled against that. And part of this, describing it as a cult, is me describing it that way because it helps me to understand why I've stepped back from it rather than it actually being a cult, although it might well be. So yeah, I just thought, this just isn't for me. There is a different way to be fit and healthy than this kind of just embracing chasing podiums and likes for doing so on social media, and that isn't what I want to do. In fact, interesting, I have a video coming up in a couple of weeks where I'm going to spend an entire week doing 0 exercise, but hopefully burning thousands of calories. So for example, I'm going to go shopping, but I'm going to walk to the shops, which will take me an hour. I'm going to carry all the shopping home, which will exhaust me. The point being that I'll be staying fit and healthy for a really good reason, which is going to obtain my shopping, as opposed to the rather weird reason of just running to do a time and a distance. I mean, it's all very artificial. So I'm trying to just get away from the stereotypical approach to exercise that we see at the moment and go back to a slightly more kind of raw, organic approach to it. Back even to a time when exercise didn't even exist. I mean, you go back 1,000 years, no one exercised, but everyone was fit and healthy, or they weren't, and then they were dead. But until then, they were out doing stuff. They were fit and healthy. I think was it King George said, the exercise is ridiculous. If you're fit and healthy, you don't need it, and if you're unwell, you shouldn't do it. And I kind of think that there's a point there. If your lifestyle is fit and healthy, then you don't need to exercise. There's people living in kind of remote parts of the world still doing remote things that don't go to the gym and do deadlifts, but do run to the next village when they need something. So I'm going to try and do a bit of that. So yes, it was just a kind of a kickback against turning on Instagram and seeing just one person after another in a gym deadlifting with their shirt off, and just thinking, that's not the world I want to be in.
I'm lucky enough or unlucky enough not to have an Instagram login or whatever you call it, so I don't see these people deadlifting with their shirts off. I'll probably steer clear, but I take your point.
They are plentiful.
Okay, okay. Not all the King Georges were that fit and healthy, of course. But
I think the one who's to whom that quote is attributed is the one that was mad.
Not in the best of shapes. and actually, you say 1,000 years ago people didn't exercise. I think voluntary exercise realistically only started something like 100 years ago. I mean, I don't think pre-1900 very many people at all doing what we call voluntary exercise, going for a jog or lifting weights. I think it was barely known and wasn't prominent at all until the post-war era and really after the 60s. So it's a very recent thing.
Yeah, well, my dad is in his mid-80s and is fit and healthy and will never have done a deadlift in his life. He'll never have done a squat. I don't think he's ever been in a gym. I mean, he might have had a set of dumbbells when he was in the RAF at some point, but yeah, never, inverted commas, exercised, and yet every day is just burning through calories, chopping wood, walking the dog, doing DIY. It's a modern thing. And in fact, exercise, you can go even further back. Sport sport is also a relatively modern thing in the sense that it was only when we stopped kind of constantly warring with each other that we had to have another outlet for kind of predominantly male testosterone. So we said, okay, let's have sport instead, and let's have the Greeks, let's run. Why? Well, because why not? Until then, nobody was having running races. No. I often use animals as a simple example. There's no animal doing sport, but most wild animals are fit enough just being. And I want to try and do that. I want to try and get back to a place where just by being, I'm ticking all the boxes for health without having to artificially create them.
I think it's very interesting, and I did actually write a sort of review article or a sort of commentary piece once for a journal, sort of asking, do wild animals exercise to keep fit? Of which we don't have an answer. but it's not obvious that they do.
No.
But it's possible that some do. I mean, if you put a running wheel in a forest, as some German researchers did, you will find that mice and other animals will use it. Now, who knows what that means? It's pretty crazy, but it's an interesting observation.
It is. I
Um,
wonder if they think they're getting somewhere though.
yeah, yes, it wonders. I
Yeah.
mean, one would imagine that a mice is smart enough to know that it doesn't, but it may be that at some hormonal level it just likes doing it, that it's predisposed to like running distance.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes. Although interestingly, that makes perfect sense, and it makes perfect sense that it would be predisposed to enjoying running, because that's incredibly beneficial for a mouse to be able to do that and cover ground and find food and shelter and so on. Actually, by getting it to do that in a wheel, it's taking something that is incredibly beneficial to that mouse, covering ground, and completely removing the beneficial aspect to the mouse of covering ground. I mean, it's quite interesting that, if I go for a run, I might burn a couple of thousand calories on that run and think, oh, good. But actually, to use the mouse analogy there, I've just wasted 2,000 calories because I could have used that doing some DIY and improving my shelter, to use that sort of terminology. So yeah, exercise is interesting. It's almost if everyone stopped working out and started expending their calories on genuinely constructive things, whatever, litter picking, whatever it might be, how much could we get done? We're all just mice running on a wheel in a
Oh, well, that's
forest.
interesting. Yes, how much could you actually get done that is being spent in the gyms? If everyone in the
Yeah,
gym instead of running on the treadmill, that is true.
yeah.
The question for animals would be, or a question for animals could be, by doing the activity they need to do to exist, so foraging and so forth, does that get them fit enough, for example, for that burst activity needed to get away from a predator, for example? We just don't know the answer to that. It may well be that it does, but for example, it's possible that the mouse is wired to like running, whether it's on a treadmill or not, because it needs to do a certain number of steps in the day, to use a sort of analogy that human beings often work to stay fit enough to keep away from predators. It could be, and it's just conjecture, that a bird could fly in a straight line to its nest, but it decides to go the long route to stay fitter. I'm not suggesting that they do, but but I agree with your point that humans are doing something supposedly very unusual in doing voluntary exercise, which is designed purely to get them fitter, as opposed to anything else.
I love the idea that when you see a bird, in fact, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to see a bird now without thinking of what you just said. Every time I see a bird just randomly flying around and not appearing to go anywhere, it'll be that I will assume it's doing it because it has some sort of genetic predisposition to do that, in order that when it does need to fly somewhere a bit further than normal, it's fit enough to do so. It didn't even know why it was doing it. It just felt compelled to do it.
Well, that is possible. I mean, migratory birds will load up on mass. I mean, so for example, certain birds that migrate long distances, they'll eat more before they migrate. They don't do any exercise. In fact, often they'll do very little activity, right? And yet they'll load up the pectoral muscle, so that the muscles
Yeah.
to power the wings. So they have an ability to put on muscle through triggers that aren't exercise per se, whereas human beings, it appears that through most of our lives, but not teenage boys, for example, through most of our lives, we can only put on muscle if we do the exercise that triggers those muscles to grow.
Yes.
Right? Whereas some animals will put on muscle without doing exercise. In fact, it looks like they're not doing exercise to maximize the net calorie gain they're getting. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So, polar bears will hibernate and they'll lose muscle mass, but not in key leg muscles. They just don't lose it from the calf muscles, for example. Now, if you've hibernated for months and you come out of hibernation, you're looking for food, the last thing you want to be is weak, because
Yes.
you're down
Yes.
the slippery slope to death. Same for penguins that will fast on land for long periods, and they've got to wander off to sea and dive deep into the water and chase motile fish to get any food. Well, if you're too weak, you're past that kind of tipping point and you've had it. So anyway, there's some interesting things going on there, and as I say, not all animals are following the rules that humans seem to, which is, as you say, if you if you stop doing your exercise for 4 months, well, maybe your weight doesn't change, but your fat to muscle ratios change quite radically. And I suspect you found that you couldn't run nearly as quickly and couldn't row as fast and things.
Well, funny enough, literally this week, I'm doing 5 cardiovascular challenges to measure, yes, how far backwards I've gone, and what is my 5K now versus what it was last year. And what's interesting is that they will all be worse, clearly. But what's interesting is, and it's almost impossible to measure, an amount of that fall off will be because I am heavier, and an amount of that heaviness has been accrued because of modern diet. So if I'd taken the last 4 months off of not exercising, but with a diet available to me in 1824, I might not be quite so heavy as I am in 2024. And so it's not just that 4 months off has made me slower. It's 4 months off and a constant supply of carb-heavy junk food has made me slower. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think my cardiovascular fitness, I think human beings, and it does make sense to me that human beings have a reasonable degree of cardiovascular ability. Just to, yeah, and you go off and find the Tarahumara tribes and stuff in Mexico, and the Ethiopians that are quite happy kind of jogging around. And I say jogging around, what they regard as jogging around, at a level that we would regard as being elite athletes, and yet to them it's just kind of going to the next village and so on. So I do feel that the cardiovascular fitness is something that we, certainly I just kind of feel it doesn't drift off as fast as people think it does. But the reason my 5K will be slower is because I'm just slower at 106 kilos than I am at 99 kilos, because I'm carrying 7 kilos more. If I put 7 kilos in a backpack last year, I would be slower. My cardio fitness will bounce back fast.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's all true. I'd say a couple of things there. If you've got a flattish course, it'll affect you less, of course, than if you're having to lug it up hills. And I think most park runs are relatively flat, but 6Ks in a backpack is going to be different to 6Ks sort of around your body, but obviously there's some comparison there. I suspect, and by the way, I have no scientific grounding for this, but I suspect there's some sort of kind of wake up trigger that's required. So that very first run back can be that much worse in terms of times than just the next run after that. And the next run, people often will interpret that as, well, I got fitter from the first run, but I think it's more the body's sort of woken up. Now, whether that's, well, there could be a number of physiological things that we could consider, but I think there's a kind of, broadly speaking, a wake up to get the body back to recognizing it's being asked to do a certain thing. And though that seems to switch off quite quickly when exercise stops, which makes people feel they've lost fitness quicker than they really have.
Yeah, I mean, almost as much physically as mentally, there's a wake up, but because when you run the second park run, you're just you can now. I know, for example, when I go and do my first one, which will be next Saturday, and it'll be the first park run, it'll be the first 5K I've done in months. I know that I will have forgotten things that make me faster. So, for example, I will have forgotten the point at the run where I know it's time to kick, and I'll have forgotten how the first kilometre is horrible, but don't worry, because by 2 kilometres it feels okay again, and I'll just be running along, depressed at 1K that it feels that bad, whereas previously I'd be thinking it's about to get better, and so my whole mindset needs to remember the process of running, and parkrun's a very good example, because I've run so many that after a while I do get into a very patterned way of doing it. There'll be literally a point where I think there's the tree where on the last lap I kick, and stuff like that will have been forgotten, or at least it won't be at the forefront of my mind. So yes, you're right. The second time I go and do it, it will be different and better. And the weight thing is, I mean, you're right. 6 kilos, 7 kilos in a backpack is different. Although it's different, but there are similarities. I mean, I know that one of the things I'm going to be doing, for example, is a 400-meter lap around the track, and I know that running at pace, at speed, I feel my body. 106 kilos is it's a chunk of weight to be moving, and it feels very. The best way to describe it is out of control. When my ratio of body fat to muscle is not where I want it to be, I feel a little bit more out of control. I feel like I'm just kind of carrying. Well, I mean, I'm carrying what I am, which is this kind of blancmangy coat of blubber that's not quite staying where it's supposed to. When I'm lean and I'm six-pack lean as I was last summer, and I run, I feel completely in control of every ounce of me because I am. I mean, every part of me is going exactly where I want it to go. Whereas when you're carrying a bit more weight, your chest bounces around and stuff, and you just feel. I can feel my back, the fat of my back moving up and down. It's annoying. It's like running with a backpack or it's like running with a coat on. That's the best way to describe it. And psychologically, again, irrespective of how heavy that coat is, it just throws me off that I'm not feeling that. I often compare myself to like a machine when I'm really on form and I'm feeling great and I'm running. I feel like a robot almost, in that I'm in complete control of what every single muscle is doing, and yeah, it's all down to me. Whereas when I'm out of shape, I feel like a robot with a fur coat on that's just kind of getting in the way, and it annoys me that there's kind of part of me that, because your body fat you're not in control of, you can't, it's just along for the ride, and running, it very much feels like that. It feels a kind of bouncy wobbliness that's just not conducive to
and if nothing
positive
else, that
thinking.
gives you that negative feedback. It's like, oh, I'm not
Mm,
quite in my best shape at the moment. It's a bit frustrating. Yeah, I
absolutely.
can imagine that.
Yeah.
So having sort of mildly dissed, prescribed gym-based training and so forth, nonetheless, I'm going to a quick fire round from you. So back in the day, just a few months ago, I'm sure you'll recover it soon, where you were, broadly speaking, at your best, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
Right, let's get your stats then. Let's get your stats. Let's find out what this guy can do. So broadly speaking, your bench.
Well, what a great thing to do, because my stats are poor. My best bench press ever, 95 kilos. I did try and achieve I went on a program to try and get to 100. Never did it. So 95.
Long arms, right? I win that. 107 and
Long
a
arms.
half.
Yeah, the long
107.
arms is the thing. My wingspan is about 6'8", which is good for dunking a basketball if I wasn't fat, but it's not good for bench pressing or pull-ups.
I mean, ideal for that would be a barrel chest and short arms.
The powerlifter, yeah. You look at the powerlifting guys, yeah, exactly that.
So that one of the issues, even with these kind of, you might consider them quite kind of simple or fundamental tests of physical ability. They don't test pure strength, whatever pure strength is. They're testing also leverage and the angles of your joints.
Yes, it's actually very hard to test pure strength because, as you say, the human body is relying on levers to such a massive extent that how can you? It makes no sense to test strength the way we traditionally test it. I mean, maybe grip strength and stuff is one of the few that kind of is a across the board level for everybody. But yeah, the minute you start involving a 6'8" lever, not that one of my levers is 6'8", but you know what I mean. And you compare me to a guy that's 5'5", 5'6", I'm going to get destroyed.
I'll ask you another tough one then, and we'll get the probably not so good ones out of the way. This is a guess. How many pull-ups?
I used to be able to do 10. I did a video actually a couple of weeks ago on my strength drops over the last few months, and I was down to 2 pull-ups, and that wasn't like kind of putting it on for the camera. I could not do more than 1 3/4 pull-ups. I mean, just couldn't do it. My bench press was down to, I think I got 80, so down from 95 to 80. Just wasn't moving. Yeah.
I think well, maybe this is going to be a tough one for you as well. So okay, so I get 12 pull-ups, so I'm 2 up on you. I've decided this is a competition now because I'm doing quite well at the moment, but I think it's all going to go wrong for me. So, but maybe not this one. Squats.
Well, I thought you were going to say deadlifts. So I was going to say, oh,
No,
thank
I'm
goodness.
leaving. No. No. I know that's
Yeah.
one of your races. Squats.
Okay, so squats is an interesting one. I have no idea. Never
Okay.
in my life have I tried to squat more than I've probably squatted body weight, so 100 kilos. I would have done that just at some point, but no, I've ergonomically, it's just never lent itself to me, so I've never pushed it. I wouldn't have a clue what my maximum squat was.
No, and I think that's probably sensible in a way, but I'm going to put that as a win for me, obviously.
Yeah, take it.
I wasn't planning this. Okay, now we'll come more into, I think, what's more your ballpark. Deadlift, go on.
Well,
Hit us with your deadlift.
so my deadlift, I got up to 450 pounds, which is 200 and just over 200 kilos. Having said that, I will never deadlift heavy again for the rest of my life. I mean, I don't regard. I'm not quite sure why actually. I mean, when I was a kid, deadlifting wasn't even a thing. I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't. Regular gym goers didn't deadlift when I was a kid. It's social media, I think, has just kind of made it just a cool thing to do. It's a weird one. I do Romanian deadlift still, and I do some light deadlift work, posterior chain and stuff, but I'll probably never deadlift more than, I don't know, 120, 130 kilos maybe. I wouldn't ever go above that. I find that the chance of injury and the back pain I get from it is just not worth it. I got to 450, which is more than Hugh Jackman, which is my goal. I thought if I can beat Hugh, I'm happy. So I did. And yeah, I did at one point think, oh, maybe 500 pounds, but it's again, being tall with the deadlift doesn't really help. People will say, but Eddie Hall, Brian Shaw, those guys are massive. It helps if you are very tall and you take huge amounts of drugs. What you can then do is put on a gigantic amount of size to a very large frame. If you have a frame that doesn't have massive amounts of drug assistance, you're just tall with the wrong levers. So deadlift are not a great deadlift shape either, but by nature of being 100 kilos and determined.
No, that's a good deadlift. That's a good deadlift, and that definitely beats me. I won't even bother. Well, actually, to be honest, it would be about 120, 130. So about what you would come down to keep your back in shape is about my max. So.
Yes, that's yeah. Well, if I'm feeling really rough, I'll do your max. Yeah.
I mean, you are right. It's a funny one because I just don't want to do a deadlift and sit and my back goes. So to be honest, there's always been a little bit of just taking the edge off and not pushing it super hard because I kind of think it's not worth the bother, but it's not worth the risk.
It absolutely isn't. No, I think it was Brian Shaw I saw say on Joe Rogan podcast a while ago that unless you are competing, doing crazy heavy deadlifts is just not worth the risk reward. It's just there's other things you can do.
But something like bench press, as long as you've got someone there, you can walk away from it. You just have a go and it doesn't come off your chest, fair enough. But for deadlifts, it's a different matter. So I agree with you.
Bench press, ultimately, if you go crazy heavy on a flat bench, at some point, you're probably going to, a lot of guys end up tearing pecs and stuff. But for the casual gym goer, the casual gym goer can go and try their 1 rep max bench, and they probably won't be strong enough to tear something. So the guys that tear muscles on the bench are the guys that are so strong they can be tearing muscles because they're moving enough weight. I was saying to my kid recently, he was talking about, have I warmed up enough on the bench? And I was like, dude, you're not. Your 1 rep max is not enough to tear the muscles you've got. So almost don't even bother warming up. With a deadlift, it's very different. You could, and I've picked up my toothbrush off the floor before and put my back out. So doing it with 200 kilos would be very easy. So yeah, it's not an exercise I like.
No, okay, but you've been there and done it and got the badge.
So. Yeah.
Let's go aerobic then. So I read you about this actually a bit on the email. But at park run, what's your best park run time?
My best park run is a 19 minutes 1 second. My best 5K is an 18 minute 34.
Okay, yeah, that's not bad actually. Okay, and Do you attribute the difference to the terrain underfoot, or was it a slightly different fitness level at the time?
Different fitness level. I was training for high rocks, and I have a 500-meter loop around my house, which is hard surface. That helps as well, because I was running a hard surface. I was running it in fancy carbon shoes that I don't wear for park run. But also I was at peak fitness. Had I gone and done a park run, I would have probably run just under 19. Right now, I mean, I'm going to do this park run on Saturday to see where I'm at. If I run under 22 and a half, I'll be real happy, happy. And I have to remind myself that actually still running a 23-minute park run is, there's not many. If you took a random selection of 1,000 50-year-old blokes, I'm still going to be quicker than most.
You will be. Well, you can see the stats online. Which park run is that?
I'll be doing Woodley Park Run in Reading.
Woodley Park Run. Now, I think you're good at this as well. The rowing, is it 500-meter row? Is that the?
Yeah, I've got you beat on the row. Yeah. So my 500-meter row. I mean, my best ever is when I was a kid. I probably rowed a 1:15 or something. Lately, what did I do last year? I think last year I did like a low 120s. I did one a couple of weeks ago, unfit, untrained, not been on the machine in 4 months, and it was terrible. I did a 136 or something, but that was, I mean, for some people doing a 136 would be okay, but for me doing a 136 felt like, I mean, just horrific. I mean, just so I'm a million miles away, and that will come back fast. I could get on the machine now and probably get closer to 130. So my row's okay. Interestingly, I have no rowing skill at all. Never been trained, never used a rowing machine that much even. It is simply down to all of my ergonomics that work so against me for things like bench press and pull-ups fit perfectly onto a rowing machine. Had I not been lazy and gone along to row training that I'd been invited to when I was a teenager and kind of persevered with it, I should probably have rowed at a high level, but I didn't because I was lazy. So all I'm left with.
It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort, the rowing, the way they get up very early in the morning and the very long
exactly
rows.
That. I got invited to. Yeah, I rowed sub 6 for 2K when I was about 17, 18. Almost never having used a rowing machine. I just could row. So I got invited to Leander and went and had a little kind of play with them. And yeah, they said, we train at whatever o'clock in the morning. And I said, do you? I don't get out of bed till what? So I gave it up. Never did it. Interestingly enough, I've got Sir Steve Redgrave is on my podcast in a few weeks' time. So it's quite interesting. It's kind of gone full circle that I was supposed to be at his rowing club training when I was a kid, and completely gave it up. Thought that not that our paths would ever have necessarily entwined then, but it's kind of gone full circle.
Oh, well, at least you get your moment with Steven Redgrave, even if it's not in the rowing boat. Even if it's not in the boat.
A bit late, but better late than never.
Yeah, indeed. And last one on this, have you had your VO2 max tested?
I have. I've tested it in a few different ways, although I can't remember, and I've got videos on it because I can't remember what it was. I know that Garmin always has it as superior, low 60s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been, and again, it's an interesting one because VO2 max is something that obviously you can improve with training, and because the VO2 max number is as a it's per kilogram of body weight, you can improve it just by losing weight. But that aside, I've been told by a number of people that have been testing me for VO2 max over the years that a lot of it is just kind of genetic. Some people are strong, some people are weak, and some people are just born with a VO2 max capability. And so the elite athletes you see with ridiculously high VO2 maxes, it's the kind of swimmer's body mistake that people make where they think, oh, if I swim, I'll get a swimmer's body. Where of course swimmers' bodies are, they swim because they have the swimmer's body in the first place. The same with elite athletes. People that end up, being ultramarathon runners and so on, go into it with an incredible, predisposition to being able to do incredible cardiovascular events. They don't necessarily go into it useless and then develop that ability. So I'm someone that I've always just been able to, even when I first started running, quite quickly get to a place where I could run better than you would have thought, given my history of running. If I wasn't 100 kilos and 6'6", I'd probably be an elite distance runner. But that's the thing that holds me back. I mean, I just don't. I'm too heavy.
You're a James Cracknell equivalent, because I mean he was a good rower, exceptional rower, sorry, and then ran marathons pretty damn quickly, and looks odd doing it because he's a big, tall chap.
He is, and I've stood next to James at a couple of things, and yeah, he's a big guy, and I'm bigger than him. So if you imagine James Cracknell looking odd, I look even more odd. That's why he's a little bit faster than me. So yeah, I mean it's just. It's annoying, but because interesting, I don't like rowing, so I like running. I'd rather I was built for running, than everyone going, oh, you're a great rower, and I'm like, well, yeah, so what? It's the most stupid sport ever, because you either have to do it on the river, which is cold and wet, or you have to do it indoors, which is boring. Running is just a beautiful thing to do. And so much more natural and organic than rowing. I mean, just the very nature of needing a vehicle to do it makes it a bit.
I know what you mean. You just put your shoes on at the front door, and a lovely day like this, you can go off and jog and get back to the front door. And yeah, I know what you mean. It's
absolutely. I can grab my dog, and a man running with his dog is it's about as kind of primal as you can get, really. A rowing, or even worse, a rowing machine is the opposite of that. I could go back 10,000 years and go running with my dog and pass somebody else, and they think, oh, there's someone running with their dog, despite being from 10,000 years ago. If I took my rowing machine 10,000 years ago, they'd probably wonder what the heck that was, and then eat me, or whatever one did 10,000 years ago.
Things like that. I think that broadly happened. Do you have, obviously you've done a lot already over the last good few years, since you kind of recovered your fitness. Are there things that you feel you can still broadly get better at? I mean, obviously there's ups and downs. You do less training, you get less fit, and then you do the training, you get fit. Are there aspects so that you feel there's still kind of an opportunity for long-term improvement, and are you interested in that?
Yes, I mean, absolutely, there is, and one of the joys that I have of having started so late is that I do have that at 50. I will be better at things in the future. People often say to me, "Oh, I'm out of shape. I'm 45. It's all, I've left it too late." I mean, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. You've got 50 years maybe of life, and a good chunk of them getting better. So no, most people, for example, James Cracknell is a good example. James Cracknell is not as fit today as he was when he was in the Olympics. And never will be. Whereas I will be better in a couple of years' time. So there is a benefit to leaving it, or at least a silver lining to that cloud. There are some things that I'll never be as good at. I mean, and they're things that I actively have chosen to put to one side. So I'll never, deadlift is a good example. I'm just not interested. Rowing as well, probably. Rowing's quite hard because I probably won't ever row quite as fast as I have done in recent years. But on the running side and the cycling side in particular, absolutely no question, I'll be faster. I mean, I will run an 18-minute park run. I just will, barring death. So that will happen. I've got a 1 hour 36 half marathon. I will run a sub 1:30 marathon. On the cycling front, the world's my oyster, because I've got no real achievements there at all. I don't do anything particularly well on the bike because I'm so new to it. So every time I do a biking event, just by the nature of kind of newbie games, I'm getting better. So yeah, on that front, I mean, the other thing as well is that as I get older, my expectation is that I will naturally lose a bit of muscle size, and I certainly won't be quite so big and broad, and I'll get a bit lighter. And I'm always quite looking forward to being sort of 58, 59, getting on for 10 years' time, and just being a slightly more kind of leaner version of myself just through the passage of time rather than anything that I actively do. And suddenly finding that when I go and do a half marathon, for example, I'm finishing it stronger than I do now. Because one of the problems I have now is any distance over 10K, the 100 kilos starts to become an issue. And it's not that I'm getting cardiovascular fatigue. It's just the pounding on my body of thousands and thousands of steps with 100 kilos on top of them. That just starts to add up. And towards the end of a half marathon, and absolutely the end of a marathon, I'm just feeling like I've been run over because I'm just moving such a lump through kind of time and space. I don't have it on the bicycle so much because that doesn't apply. It's a more cushioned ride, but running is not helped with my weight. Park run is a nice one because it doesn't matter. I can tolerate being a lump for 20 minutes. But once you go beyond 10K distance, for me at least, I start to feel heavy. That's the best way to describe it. If I do a 10K, I think my best 10K ever was a 40-minute 11-second, and at that point I'm starting to feel heavy, and I look forward to not, so that I can get under 40 minutes, because that's another thing that I will do at some point. It's just hard to do it at 100 kilos.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That makes it actually. So someone who's a big guy running, let's say, sub 20-minute 5K pace is quite an impressive sight. I mean, they might not look beautiful running, but it's impressive when a big guy is shifting that quickly, because that's rare to see. And you kind of think, yeah, that's good. They're in good shape because they're moving a lot of weight to do that. So it's always kind of quite good to see, if you like.
Oh, indeed, yeah. When I'm at the end of a park run, or indeed any distance event, and yeah, and I see somebody of my size, if they're up with me, I'm in fact, funny enough, I ran that 40-minute 11-second 10K I did was at Reading Green Park, and Reading Green Park 10K has a huge crowd at the end of it. And I remember going onto the final straight, which is a couple of 100 meters in front of the crowd. And as I did, there was a guy in front of me who was a big guy. He must have been, he wasn't as tall as me, but he was jacked. He was 6'2", must have been 6'2" or 6'3", big guy. And I saw him and I thought, well, I never get beaten by someone bigger than me. I'm just, in that niche of big and fast, I rule. So I thought I'd chase him down. I couldn't catch him. And he saw me coming, he felt me coming, so he sped up. And so it ended with the two of us just sprinting basically down the last couple of 100 meters and flying past everyone else that was running 40-minute 10Ks.
The ground was shaking.
Yeah, well, we must have looked. We probably thought we looked absolutely stunning. Most people watching probably thought, "What a couple of idiots!" And of course, all the kind of 5'6", 120-pound runners that look like runners were kind of just being sort of scattered to the sides as we kind of barreled through the middle. So no, it stands out to me when I see someone as big as me, or even close to as big as me, up where I am on a 5K, 10K half marathon. It's a rarity and lovely to see. It's great.
Yeah, good on them. Yeah. Quite.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it is a different challenge. Like lugging weight around. Yeah, people say, "Oh, it's easy. You've got long legs." Well, that's not quite how the physics works. Kipchoge's 5'6", but so doesn't have long legs, but can jog quite well. So
yes, as we've seen. Right, look, just pivoting now. Last part, Mark. I've taken up a lot of your time. It's very, very interesting. The diet side of things. So, lots of people talk lots about the details of diet and all these sorts of things, which we're not going to do here. Actually, I'm interested to know, just very broad brush, just the basics. What's your take on diet? I mean, you talk about the fact that you come in and out of let's say an athlete's diet. So sometimes you're, being very careful, and other times you're not. But even during the periods where you're being relatively careful, I mean, what's the deal there? Is your, if I can put words into your mouth potentially, I don't want to, but is your take on it that you think diet's super important, that you're letting yourself down if you do all this training, you don't absolutely nail the diet? Or do you lean more towards the idea that, look, if you're doing a lot of exercise, you can get away with eating quite a lot of stuff, and as long as you get enough nutrients in, then a little bit of fun stuff on top of that isn't too big a deal. Just make sure you get enough portions of protein and vegetables a day, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, it is a bit of that. I mean, I definitely believe that if you are eating for sports performance, then it really does come down to hitting the right macros and nutrients and the numbers, and how you achieve them is for me at least is secondary. So if I'm trying to achieve a certain look, or so if I want my body fat to be a certain percentage, or if I want to compete at a high rocks or whatever it might be, if I want to achieve something short term, I will hit numbers. I won't care too much how I hit those numbers. In fact, a good example of this is a guy called Hunter McIntyre, who trained me for a bit for high rocks. He's the current high rocks world champion, and an absolute, just an elite athlete, incredibly strong, and also, he is running sort of 16-minute 5Ks and deadlifting 500 pounds. And he will happily eat McDonald's and ice cream and whatever it needs. If he needs to hit those carbs, he doesn't care where they come from. He just hits them. So, and so I'm of that mindset. And people say that's not good for your health. Achieving sporting results isn't the same as being good for your health. It never is. It doesn't mean it won't always be good for your health. I mean, sometimes it might be, but another, the example of that is people often say to me, "Oh, yeah, you talk about don't heel strike when you run." Lots of elite marathon runners heel strike. Elite marathon runners aren't trying to have great knees when they're 95. They're trying to be elite marathon runners. So look, seeking great sporting performance is not the same as wanting to be healthy for a long time. Different things. So if you said to me, Mark, here's a challenge, have 8% body fat in 6 months and I'll give you 10 grand. 10 grand might not be enough, 20 grand. I would do it. And the diet would not be an example of healthy eating. It would be strict and boring, and it would be calorie controlled, but it might not be, it wouldn't be healthy, inverted commas, but it would get the job done. I try not to do that. What I try to do is eat in a way that, because I'm 50, means I am going to be in good cardiovascular health at 85 and 90 maybe. So I do give that thought. So there's 3 types of diet really. There's the I don't care what it is as long as it hits the numbers for performance achievement diet that I sometimes use if necessary. There's the eat as healthy as possible so that I have great longevity, and also in the meantime still achieve the things I want to achieve diet. That is what I would love to be able to do most of the time. And then there is the, I've just had my 4th bowl of Cocoa Pops and it's only 10:30 a.m. diet that I fall into. Those are my 3 diets. And at any one time I could wake up and experience a day of any one of them. And the fact that I have no control over that, that's a lazy way of putting it, the fact that I feel like I have very little control over that is of great annoyance. I mean, the best way to describe it is an eating disorder, in that my eating is disordered. That I've never had an official diagnosis, and so I always hesitate slightly to sort of label it in that way. But equally, when I describe to people how my eating can go off the rails, everyone I describe that to says, "Yeah, mate, that is disordered eating." So, feel free to label it. So yeah, that's kind of a long answer to the question. But there is sports diet that I rarely use. There is healthy eating diet that I try to adhere to, and then there is the that, oh, that's all gone wrong, which unfortunately last 4 months, for example, has probably been 80% of my diet. Whereas hopefully from kind of here on, once I've got this little week of cardio testing out of the way, in a way, see, I'll tell myself, here's an example of how disordered eating works. I will tell myself that it's okay for me to eat rubbish today, because actually looking a little bit fatter and more useless come Saturday when I do that park run will just emphasize how far backwards I've gone. And that will make good YouTube content, because in the summer I can then emphasize how far I've gone forward. And therefore I can eat some junk tonight. I have a pizza tonight. So none of that makes any sense. I mean, having a pizza tonight isn't going to make a blind bit of difference to how I look on Saturday. It's just nonsense. But it's the part of my brain that is just permanently occupied with finding a reason, a justification for why I can eat badly. And it goes right back to loop this all the way back to when I was 20 years old. That part of my brain that had been saying to me, eat badly, and I'd been saying, no, teenage girls. Suddenly that part of my brain said, hey, you're getting married now, and actually money's more important than girls. So and it won, and that part of my brain won for decades, and all I did was eat. And I then found a reason to say to that part of my brain, hang on a minute, I'm now getting divorced. If I look, rubbish, that's not going to bode well. So you take a back seat. And almost when things go well and things are good, then that part of my brain pipes up and says, what are you worried about? What's the problem? You don't need to look good. People are watching your YouTube channel, whether you look good or look bad. People actually like you screwing up on YouTube and doing badly because it makes you relatable. Have a bit more to eat. So when that part of my brain kicks in, I have no control over it. And again, I mean, in a way that's helpful for YouTube because many people are the same, because I hear from them every single day, and it's nice for them to be able to know that, well, firstly, they're not alone, and also that it's not a death sentence. You can. I am always going to be an obese person. It's a bit like being an alcoholic. I have very too close experience of alcoholics, and you are never not an alcoholic once you're an alcoholic. Whether you have a drink or not is by the by. I'm an obese person. The fact that I stopped being literally obese doesn't mean that I'm not predisposed to ending up that way. And whether that's because I don't believe that, again, if you took me and you put me back 10,000 years, my predisposition to being obese would actually just mean that when I found a fruit tree, I might eat a bit too much fruit. But that's all I've got available. So I'm still walking around with a six-pack. The trouble today is that there are no fruit trees, but there's the garage down the road that sells chocolate. Mm-hmm. So people think, oh, it's a modern problem. It's not a modern problem. It's I'm that mouse that can't resist jumping on the wheel in the forest. So I will always be obese, and I always have to fight ending up back there. But everyone has their battles to fight on a daily basis, and mine is that it's in a way it's entertaining. I've learned over the last 50 years that if life is like a movie, and a good movie does need it needs a conflict and then a resolution. It needs something going wrong and then being put right. That's what makes good story, and life is story. So for me, having things like the last 4 months go wrong in a way is good. It's entertaining. It makes my life entertaining. It makes it a roller coaster. Who wants to be on a train? I mean, trains are boring. I don't want to be on a train. I want to be on the ups and downs. And if you want ups and downs, you can't moan, oh, it's down now. Well, it will be, but it'll be up too. You can't have one without the other. So I've become very sort of pragmatic about things going inverted commas wrong. They're not wrong. It's not wrong when Rocky gets knocked out, as long as he gets back up and carries on fighting. It's that's part of the journey. So so I just put up with it.
One more thing I do want to throw in there. One more question I've got for you as the wise exerciser that you are. Again, just broadly, because we sadly we can't go into details. But I wonder if you've got. Well, perhaps this is the point. I wonder if you've got broad thoughts of advice, or maybe you don't. That's fine too, because we don't want to misadvise people with regards injuries. So obviously every injury is different parts of the body, different people get them in different ways. Presumably you've had injuries. What are your collective thoughts on injuries, how to deal with them? Whether, for example, supplements can help, whether there tends to be something that a generality that tends to generate injuries, or something that generally we can do to get them better. Is it because we're not flexible enough, we're not strong enough? Is there any words of wisdom you can give to people that can help them with the typical injury? People can have specific issues, but typically, how do we, because they're so frustrating when we're just getting fit and then we get the injury. What's the deal there? Should we go to the physio?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, one thing you said, are we not flexible enough and so on? And absolutely, that's the case. And again, you don't have Instagram, but if you had it, you're in a fitness kind of a fitness bubble of seeing people doing stuff. You are going to see people doing deadlifts and squats, and you're not going to see people doing, psoas stretching and stuff. It's because it just doesn't play well on Instagram. So. And the same follows through. Then you go to the gym, you walk around a gym, you're going to see people lifting weights everywhere, and you're going to see very few people doing any cardio, and you're going to see nobody doing any flexibility. So it's absolutely the case that we don't do enough of that. And I mean, going back to animals, my dogs will never get up without then stretching. Every single time they get up, they'll stretch. They must stretch 30, 40 times a day. And consequently, my dog has never, to my knowledge, pulled a muscle. Yet if I throw a stick, I don't give him a warm up first, he's ready to go. So stretching, absolutely. And I've incorporated that into my daily routine. I'm starting to sound like Huberman, but I wake up and I do stretching in the mornings and throughout the day. I don't sit down much. I only sit down for this sort of stuff. When I get up from this, I'll do some stretching. I'll stretch out my hip flexors and stuff that I've got tight. So stretching, definitely. In terms of the only two things I'd say, because I'm no expert on injury at all, and I've been quite lucky, touch wood, I haven't had many, but the two things that I would say, firstly, the old idea of rest and do nothing, and what was it, Rice, wasn't it? Rest, ice, compress, and elevate. I'm not a big believer in that. I think the human body typically does well if you keep it moving in the way that you want it to be able to move once you're better. So, for example, I used to roll ankles when I played basketball as a kid, and I would just stop playing and I'd tape them up and wouldn't do anything with them, and they'd take years to recover. And then when I started running, I started rolling ankles, doing off-road running, and someone told me just keep moving it. It'll hurt, but just move it. And I did, and suddenly realized that actually that was brilliant. It stopped tightness, it stopped scar tissue, it helped recovery. So I'm a big believer in moving. I hurt my back last year and ignored my own advice. I basically did nothing for weeks, and it just got worse and worse. And then when I started talking to proper physios that knew what they're doing, and they were saying, "Why are you doing nothing?" I said, "Well, it hurts." Of course it hurts. You've hurt it. Tough. Go and walk. Go and move around. Within reason. If you're screaming in pain, then call it a day. But yeah, keep mobile. So if I have an injury, I will do something. I will. If I had a calf injury a couple of years ago that was quite bad, so I just walked instead of run, and it hurt to walk, but it got better real quick, and then it didn't hurt. So keep moving. Unless your doctor says not to, etc. I say unless your doctor. I mean, if you go to your GP because you've got a sports injury, then you're an idiot anyway. So tough luck. And what's the other thing I was going to say? The other thing is when you are injured and it really does knock you for six, and it might not be injury, it might be illness. This might be more illness than injury. But the trap that a lot of people fall into is they forget that they are going to get better. And so what they'll do is their diet will go to pot as well, because they'll think, oh, what's the point? I might as well do it. Well, the point is that in X months, you're going to be better and doing, you'll be back at it. And what you want to be is back at it as you left it, not 2 stone heavier. So I have so many people contact me and say, oh, I'm injured and it's all going rubbish. And what can you do then? You can still control what you're eating. If you've got a lower body injury, you can still go and do upper body. And again, what's the point? What's the point? The point is getting out and keeping your mind in the mindset that you are somebody who does exercise. There's all that. So yeah, basically, if you are injured and you can still move, then move. And if you can't move, do not act as though you will never move again. Because unless clearly someone tells you you're terminal and you're going to die, in which case, yeah, do what you like. Burgers are plenty. But until that day, I fall into myself. I'll get injured. And I think, oh, what the heck? I might as well eat what I like because I can't run. And before I know it, I'm better. And I'm not better because I'm now fat and slow.
Yeah, but another problem to deal with. Yeah.
And not to mention that getting, subject outside of my expertise, but I can't believe that eating junk food when you're trying to recover your body is a particularly good way to recover your body anyway. So that the two compound themselves.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That sounds very, very reasonable, very, very wise, as I say, sage, broad advice. I think that's extremely helpful, actually, Mark. Thank you very much. Well, look, I think we'll finish on that high note. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. It's wonderful. I imagine you'll be straight back in the gym after this. No.
I'm walking the dog. The sun's out. I'm going to go and walk my dog.
There we go, outdoors gym, as we were discussing at the start. That's brilliant. I look forward to seeing the next episodes from your YouTube life and seeing what you're doing next. And well, we're going to see this rapid return to peak fitness after your few months of rest.
We're going to see a return. I'm not sure where you got rapid from, but I'll give you return, not rapid.
Well, thanks so much. Good luck with it all.
Thank you.
You're confident about getting sub 18. I'm sure you will achieve that. Do you broadly know what you need to be doing on a week by week basis to get to that?
Yes, I need to be lighter, which is so huge a part of it. But in terms of my actual running, I have never ever done anything very complicated. I do 3 runs a week. I'm doing other stuff as well, but running 3 runs a week. One of those runs will be focused on speed. So it might be hill work. It might be at the track doing 400 intervals or something. It will basically be, it will be me moving at a speed way beyond parkrun speed. So whatever that will look like, intervals of some sort. There'll be a speed session. There will be a long run where I'm going to be out for at least 2 hours and maybe even going at jog/walk pace, but it will be non-stop moving for 2 hours. And then the third run will be somewhere between 5 and 10K at roughly a good parkrun pace. That's all I do. I want my body to be able to understand what it is like to move real fast. I want my body to understand what it is like to move for a good couple of hours so that it finds 20 minutes to be nothing whatsoever. And obviously I want to be able to do the thing I'm trained to do. So I just do those 3 things. I do a sprint session, a long session, and then a 5 or 10K at probably, if I was running 19-minute park runs, I'd probably be going out and doing that middle session at a sort of 21-minute park run pace. So it's not flat out, but it's quickish.